Hello and welcome back to Second Take Movies, the podcast where we give movies a second look, a second chance, a second take, if you will. I'm your host, Preston Jenkinson, and my guest today is my very good friend, Aaron Spurlock. How are we doing, man?
We're doing good.
Good.
We're doing good. About to be talking about a childhood favorite movie. So
yeah, because today we are talking about the 1989 Kevin Costner movie, Field of Dreams.
Classic.
We're going to start with a synopsis. Iowa farmer Ray Kinsella hears a voice in a cornfield tell him if you build it, he will come. He interprets this message as an instruction to build a baseball field on his farm, upon which appear the ghosts of Shoeless Joe Jackson and the other 7 Chicago White Sox players banned from the game for throwing the 1919 World Series when the voices continue. Ray seeks out a reclusive author to help him understand the meaning of the messages and the purpose for his field. And the next thing we like to do is take a look at a positive and a negative review.
Awesome.
Roger Ebert said Field of Dreams will not appeal to the Grinches and Grouches and realists. It's a delicate movie, a fragile construction of one goofy fantasy after another. It has the courage to be about exactly what it promises. And Peter Travers of Rolling Stone...
Was that a negative or a positive?
That was a positive.
Oh, man. It almost sounded negative at first.
Well, this guy...
I'm not looking forward to this one.
This guy rips into it.
Uh-oh.
Peter Travers of Rolling Stone said, "To be honest, I started hearing things too. Just when Jones was delivering an inexcusably sappy speech, which we'll get to,
Oh, yes.
about baseball being a symbol of all that was once good in America. I heard the words, 'If he keeps going, I'm walking.'" So, Peter with the sarcasm at the end there.
Oh, all right. One of the reasons we brought this movie up was with one of our favorite TV shows, mutual favorite TV shows, brings us up in their one of the episodes. I can't remember which one it is, but How I Met Your Mother talks about how one of the female characters hated the show or hated the movie, and then all the male characters like ripped into her, like, how could you hate this movie?
Yeah.
And so my wife and I have the same debate. My wife Andrea feels the same exact way as the female character in that show felt, where she thinks it's the worst movie ever made.
Yeah.
And I think it is just one of the greatest movies, and it's perfectly like fitted in right in like 1989. It's like it has a perfect mixture of the 80s like music in the background with like the weird like wind chime almost looking or feeling sounds, and then early 90s feel of like their attire and everything like that, like everything that cinematically it looks like it's early 90s, you know.
Even the poster, which I'll put on the Instagram when I post a show, it is the most 80s poster.
Yeah.
It's just Kevin Costner in like a little pose, like, I made cornfield and a baseball field.
Yeah, but I also like to play ball sometimes.
Yeah. But this movie, like I texted you last night when I was watching it. It's it loves this movie loves baseball.
Loves it.
Like, baseball is the end all be all greatest sport that was ever created.
Yeah. Don't get it twisted. This is a sports movie.
Yeah.
Through and through. So if you hate sports movies, you're likely going to hate this movie.
Right. But we'll summarize the movie. We'll continue on. The beginning, it starts. We come down from the sky and into this. Well, no, it actually starts with Kevin Costner narrating his life, basically.
Yeah.
And how his dad was obsessed with the White Sox. Yeah. And Shoeless Joe Jackson, who's from Pickens County, South Carolina, right up the road.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I don't know why I didn't know that. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think he died in Greenville. Eventually.
Goodness.
Yeah. Because they even mention in this movie that after that he went in like the minor leagues and ended up in like a league in South Carolina somewhere.
So theologically, how did he die in Greenville, South Carolina, and end up in the cornfields of Iowa? That's what I want to know.
You know, and like
the afterlife.
And like 30 or 40 years younger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Ray Liotta.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I have a friend that says I look exactly like Ray Liotta.
There you go. That's a compliment right there.
Yeah, it's better than Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, no, that is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'd take that.
But moves on to Kevin Costner walking through this cornfield, and he's hitting the ground with the shovel or
just randomly. It's like not like he's like plowing corn or anything.
Yeah. There's no way he planted that corn by himself.
No.
I grew up on a farm. It took my dad and one other guy and like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment to get that much corn planted.
Yeah.
And all I see him driving in this movie is a tractor.
Is one John Deere tractor.
Yeah.
And he has his daughter like on his lap while he's driving it. Or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like it does this like whole thing as he's narrating, and then it talks about how he met his wife, and they went out to Iowa because that's where she was from, and he bought this land with the farm, like the farmland or whatever. And it was like, it's almost like they like just moved in because they were not equipped to be farmers at all. Yeah. But like he just kind of like said, all right, I got a shovel and I got all this land. What should I do?
A success at it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But
perfectly kept farmland with one tractor.
And then almost immediately Kevin Costner starts hearing voices.
Literally, so I tracked it.
Okay.
It was 4 minutes into the movie.
4 minutes.
4 minutes into the movie. And it's like like I told you before we started recording, this is probably the first time I watched it in maybe 10 years. I know it's the first time I watched it in 6 years because my wife hates it so much and we never watched it together, and I've been with her for 6 years. And so anyways, and I was just shocked at how quickly they got to the voice. Yeah. Like, and how often the voice appeared too. Yeah. And one of the things like within, I guess, common pop culture is like a misconception that the voice just says like, if you build it, like they will come, which it never says they will come. Yeah. It only says like he will come.
That is a big misquote because people always say
if you build it, they will come or whatever.
I guess they just associate it with the baseball players.
Or with the people, which we'll get to at the end. Like, with what's his face's I just referred to James Earle Jones as what's his face. What's his face's quote at the end, like just people will come, and so they just assume that the quote was they. But anyways, it says the very first 4 minutes says if you build it, he will come, and so it leads into this mystery of who's he, and then it later has like a vision that shows that it's Shoeless Joe or whatever.
And then so he hears this voice. He keeps asking his wife if she heard that, and then he just eventually is like, whatever, I heard a voice. He's not worried about it at all.
There's no questioning.
No questioning at all.
Yeah.
Goes in the house and is just like very nonchalant. Just, I heard a voice. She's like, what did it say? He said, if you build it, he will come. And she doesn't quite. That's a real problem with, like, there's an opportunity for conflict there.
Yes.
Like, we could have had, this man putting everything on the line. He mentions to James Earle Jones, I'm putting my marriage on the line. Whatever, dude.
Yeah. The marriage was never in question the entire movie. Oh, yeah. Even though in real life, it would have been in question like the first couple of minutes. As soon as you heard that voice and you say, hey, honey, so I was out in the farmlands and I hear this voice telling me that I should destroy the farmlands that we just bought and build a baseball field. And then she responds with, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, just no questioning.
No rational human being's going to do it. No rational human being's going to respond.
Basically bankrupts his entire family.
Yeah.
Nobody questions. Like, there's this moment in the feed store where he just mentions to somebody, which all those guys in that feed store were dressed just like my grandfather and my father. That is the only thing those two men wore their entire lives. Yeah. Was a button-up shirt, jeans, and some kind of... My grandpa more of the flat bill hat, Yeah. But the old guys used to wear flat bill hats all the time.
Yeah.
And
And not like ones with the sticker still on it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. That
like
would be
they
popular.
They would
early
actually,
2000s.
have like sweat lines in them and dirt and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I recognize that feed store. I've been in a bunch of those.
Yeah.
Seed store or whatever. But
now, question for you, personal question.
okay.
Growing up, did your dad or granddad ever talk about voices that they would hear?
They've never heard a voice in their head that I know of.
That they were proud to announce in the feed store with 30 other farmers in town. Yeah.
But
that was pretty funny.
So I was surprised at how quickly it moved. Like it goes from that to, his wife is just like, oh, really? Yeah, let's go ahead and build it.
Yeah.
To like, we're getting supplies. We've got the field up. Like, it's ready to go.
Yeah. I should have marked that out. Like, it was probably 12 minutes into the movie that they actually had the field out. And everything was a go.
Yeah, this movie moves pretty quick.
It does. So they build a field. Nothing happens, right? The winter comes, and then all of a sudden the spring comes, and
that's right. It goes through the seasons.
And then Shoeless Joe appears, and he goes out, and there's this like comic relief where he tries to hit a pop up to Shoeless Joe, who was an outfielder and was a great outfielder and all this stuff.
Yeah,
tries to hit a pop up to him, just as practice, and just hits it like 2 feet in front of him.
Yeah,
and then anyways they start playing ball, and then Shoeless Joe comes back in after catching a few and says, "Hey, like, can I invite other people here?" But then in the meantime, there's this weird like camera shot where it takes a shot at Shoeless Joe's, ironically enough, Shoeless Joe's shoes, his feet, right at the edge of the baseball field where it turns into gravel because he was trying to introduce him to his family, his wife and his daughter, and Shoeless Joe couldn't move any further. He had to remain on the field or cease to exist, is what kind of the movie alludes to.
Because there's and before that, there's a scene where he gets out of bed and is just staring out the window. And again, his wife does not question it.
Nothing. At all.
But the note I had when I wrote that down, and I want to get your opinion as someone who went to seminary.
Uh-oh. This is dangerous territory.
I said it's baseball, ghost baseball players, but it's also a movie about stepping out on faith, really.
Yeah.
And it's almost an analogy for Noah. Okay.
No, I see it.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And the ice cream truck's going by.
Perfect. Hey, this podcast is all about childhood nostalgia.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It falls in perfectly.
The audience may or may not hear that.
There we go. But no, that's a really good, I think, analogy is, it's perfect because within the story of Noah, you have this isolated family that's isolated from the rest of the world, and there's something unique that's happening to this family because of their faith in God. And then here in this story, it's this isolated person who's having the same type of unique, unique storyline happen to him and his family, where he has to take the lead and feels like this is the thing that would give him purpose, thing that would separate him from the rest of the world in a sense. Whereas he saw his dad not taking that step, not taking that leap of faith, and just kind of fitting into the mold and being miserable because he just fit into the mold. And so he says like, hey, I should answer this voice. I should answer this call. Yeah. And so he takes his family along with it. And his family, his wife, obviously his daughter being, I don't know, between 4 and 6 years old, the character was, and just kind of like happily going along with it. Yeah. It was just like this, the whole story was a story of blind faith, so to speak. So yeah, I like that connection between Noah. I think there's obviously more significance into the Noah story, right? Yeah. But
one is the fate of humanity, and this is
the other one's like, hey, we can see ghosts.
He wants to play catch with his dad.
Yeah. Hey, don't spoil it. Oh man. But I like the connection. Yeah.
So it's never really answered, but are these ghosts or are these the actual players?
Good question.
'Cause
So
they seem to have all the memories.
yeah, Ray Liotta
Yeah.
answers that question.
Okay.
Remember whenever the little girl, I can't just keep referring her to, or can't keep referring to her as the little girl. So
Yeah.
Karen Kinsella said, "Hey, are you a ghost?" Talking to Shoeless Joe Jackson.
Yeah.
And he said, "Do I look like a ghost?" And she goes, "No, you look real to me." He goes, "Well, I guess I'm real." And so it gives like an open-ended answer to like, "Hey, I'm not a ghost, but I'm something in between."
Right.
Right? Because they can't actually step into the real world.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like caught in time,
And
so to
there's
speak.
apparently something in the cornfield that
Yeah.
there's a portal, there's a dimension. Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah.
And I think the movie wants, which your critic said it, was like, hey, the rational person, the logical person's going to hate this movie because it doesn't make sense.
And the person in me that loves sci-fi and fantasy stuff is like, okay, what's the rules of this world?
Correct.
What's the rules of this cornfield?
There are none.
There are none.
And it never wants you to have those. It's a movie that's rated PG for a reason.
Yeah.
It's a movie that's supposed to be like okay for kids to have or kids to watch because it's a movie that's supposed to invoke some type of nostalgia within you that makes you feel like a child again.
Yeah.
And so as a child, you don't question the fact that they go into the cornfield. Like I never did it.
Oh, that's just where they go.
That was just where they go. So it's like James Earle Jones, like later on in the movie, goes into the cornfield. Okay, good for James Earle.
Symbolic of his death, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But like you don't actually question it.
Yeah. Pat McAfee said it best, which is rare.
Okay. I'm ready for this.
The as he says it, the drama around baseball is always more interesting than baseball itself.
Yeah, that's 100% true.
Yeah.
The history of baseball is like okay, so let's take your three major sports in America. You have football, you have basketball, and you have baseball. Football is always entertaining no matter what, right? From era to era to era, like 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, everything has like its own, you know, very exciting portion of it that makes everybody in America tune in to Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah.
Basketball, they have their greats. They have, you know, you have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the 80s, you have Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and then you have Michael Jordan in the 90s, and then you have like Shaquille O'Neal in the 2000s, like these big personalities, and all of a sudden you have LeBron James who compete with the other great Michael Jordan, right, as the greatest of all time. And so it rides the backs of the greats. But baseball, what it has is the history of the fact that it was the sport back in the 1890s.
Yeah.
It was the sport back in the 1870s. It was like Babe Ruth was larger than life. And so it has this history. Yeah. Without the history, it's like there's too many players. There's too many games in a season. It's just a lot to keep up with. I mean, the season goes from April to the end of September, early October. Yeah. And who wants to keep up with a season that's 8 months long? And like, I'm a big Braves fan, and you know, they went from being in first place to second to third to now they're in first place about to clinch the division. And because I'm a Braves fan, it's like, hey, it's exciting to me, but your average Joe that would tune into the Super Bowl, they're not going to be engaged. So what does baseball have to offer? It has to offer the buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks, and it has to offer the hot dog and a beer at a game. Like, it's just a fun outing. But that's because history is so ingrained into it. Yeah. And so this movie just plays into that. Yeah. That's all it is. That's the whole point of this Shoeless Joe Jackson, like, I guess, historical account is like, hey, this guy was would have been one of the greats, but he was banned from baseball too early, and they just kind of play on that the whole way through.
Yeah, because I learned about the 1919 World Series in a history class in college.
Yeah.
Like that's baseball has it. It has a thing as being a part of not just sports history, but history because of the corruption that was going on outside, like within the city of Chicago.
Exactly.
It became a part of that history.
Yeah, like the mafia, the whole thing. Like, So, and the same thing for like the Bronx and the New York Yankees. Like they were entrenched in all the crimes in New York too, and so it's just that's a part of American history. Is like, it doesn't get more American than a baseball game and some apple pie and hamburger, like that's
right.
A hot dog. That's America, right?
Yeah.
That's what everybody thinks of as American. And I think sadly is like, again, it's because now like millennials like you and me, we're not really that enthralled by history.
Yeah.
And so we just say, hey, what's most important here and now? And baseball's kind of going to the wayside. Mm-hmm. But again, this movie, when you watch it, it like puts you back into the prime of baseball when that was like the sport.
Yeah, and that ends up becoming the conflict because the whole theme of this movie basically is Kevin Costner never got to say goodbye to his dad. Basically,
yeah.
I think he says later on that the last words he told him was he couldn't respect a man whose hero was a criminal in Shoeless Joe.
Yeah.
Which the facts they talk about is like, he took the money, but he didn't. Yeah. Like the stats show he was not trying to throw that game.
Yeah, he batted like 340 for the series, hit the series only home run and all this stuff. It was like, so he knew in his heart of hearts. So like, that wasn't true, like that statement to his dad. Like, I can never respect a man whose hero was a criminal. Yeah. And then James Earle Jones like asked him, or Terrence Mann asked him, like, hey, why did you say that? And he goes, because I was a 17-year-old kid. Yeah. And it's so relatable too, because like, I mean, I grew up, and I know you grew up with a great dad too. So I grew up with a fantastic dad, loved sports and all this stuff. And so, but at the same time, like whenever you're 16 and 17, like you just kind of, you have this weird feeling in you that you kind of want the world to be against you because you kind of want to be the one that like overcomes it all or whatever. Yeah. I don't know if it's testosterone or what. And so you like make these things up that aren't actually true about who your dad is or whatever, so that you can be like better than that. Right. And so I remember having those feelings, but now looking back on it, I'm like, I wonder if he looks back on it the same way. Cause like my dad was great. I'm a 27-year-old guy now. And as a 17-year-old kid, like I could nitpick things, but now I'm like, man, I was just a dumb 17-year-old kid, you know? Now as a 27-year-old guy, like I'm thinking, I'm hesitant to say man, right? Because I don't know if I've earned that title yet.
Wife and daughter. I would
fair.
Say,
2 daughters. Yeah,
2 daughters. Forget about the second one.
That's right. So
sorry, Andrew.
Yeah. Anyway, so I just think that that's a part of like growing up, and so I wonder, like, the 40-year-old Kevin Costner or Ray Kinsella is like in that van whenever he's talking to James Earl Jones, like, actually my dad was actually pretty great. Yeah. And there's a moment in the movie where right after they build the field and he's sitting there with his wife and he's telling like the story of how his dad would talk about Shoeless Joe, and Ray Kinsella was smiling while he was telling the story about his dad. And she goes, that's the first time I ever heard or ever saw you smile whenever you're talking about your dad. And so it's like this growing moment of like, you're growing into your dad and you're realizing that's not such a bad thing. Yeah. And that's kind of a beautiful I guess, second part of the whole story too.
So we'll move the story along. He starts hearing another phrase after he gets the baseball field built, and the White Sox start showing up, and these players show up. They practice together, and then he starts hearing "ease his pain," or
yes, that's it.
And he's like, "Who?" And of course, the wife is on board as she always is. To give context to this next scene, these two grew up in like the 60s, and like they were like hippies.
Yes.
And they said they just smoked some dope and they had some fun. So
yeah,
they go to a school board meeting where they're trying, the Iowans are trying to ban some books out of the library. That's always fun.
It's a very controversial.
It always happens in public school.
Did you ever relate to a movie so much as seeing those 90s moms like at this school board meeting talking about the like pornographic details of this terrible book that's all this stuff or whatever, and it's from a hippie that wrote it back in the 60s, and it's like there's some things that are controversial, but like these moms were like up in arms.
Thankfully my parents were never those parents that were like, Harry Potter is evil.
Mine were.
Yeah.
But they didn't go to school board meetings because they were homeschooling their kids, so they didn't have to.
My parents didn't either because my dad was working, so was my mom. So we didn't have time to go to school board meeting.
That's right.
Now they did make time to go to like, parent teacher conferences. And
sure.
My mom was always the mom that would go on field trips.
There you go. Good for her.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
As I'm older now, I realize that was.
I'm sure as a kid that was awful, but
in middle school it was terrible.
Yeah.
But
as an adult, you see how it was a good thing.
They're trying to ban Terrence Mann's book.
Yes.
And
James Earle Jones.
Yeah, his Kevin Costner's wife makes because she's not. I don't even consider her a character in this movie.
Okay. I just want to say that so I had this in my notes, like the little, so his family, the little girl was adorable all the way through, like, and that's all you want in like an 80s 90s like family film, is like the kid not to be a great actor but just be adorable,
and say cute things.
And she was adorable. The wife was not a good actress, like for 90% of the film, but that scene where she's at the school board meeting.
It's a great monologue.
Oh, it's great. That is, I'm sure that's what she tried out with, and that's what got her the role.
Yeah.
And the rest of it was just like, you probably could have gotten somebody better here.
Because there's that rebellious character in that school board meeting, and they missed the opportunity for conflict with her and her husband. I feel like she should have also not seen the baseball players, because when they show up, his entire family can see them.
Yeah.
It's like Tinkerbell, I guess. I don't know. But, anyway, in this meeting, he figures out it's Terrence Mann. That's who I need to. And
which that is the most illogical jump.
The plot required him to.
Yeah. It was like, what in the world? Like, how did you get there?
And then when they're arguing, because the first conflict they've had, they're arguing about him going because, he's taking up a bunch of his land with his baseball field, and they're not going to make the crop, and they're going to lose money, and even though there's farm loans that are pretty easy to get. But anyway.
Sure. They should have consulted you or your father back in the day.
Yeah. Well, I was.
Yeah, you wouldn't have been much good.
I was born the year this movie came out, so I was.
So they should have consulted your father and
useless.
Your granddad.
Yeah.
How does this farming thing work?
My dad's those YouTube videos where the experts weigh in on movies and TV shows, and it's like, we know it doesn't work that way. Yeah. Okay, my dad is that guy.
He would have been perfect.
Anyway, they figure out it's James Earle Jones it turns out to be Terrence Mann, and Kevin Costner argues with his wife because she's like, we're basically broke. How are you going to drive all the way to Boston? he was like, and then they figure out that it had the same dream, and she just lets him go. Like,
yeah. So
lead off with that.
Well, so we talk about this where she's like, the whole conflict thing within the marriage is like, it's non-existent. Like, hey, yes, you can build the baseball field.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can go, do this thing or that thing or whatever, and put our family in jeopardy of like financial ruin. And then she like finally starts to put her foot down.
Yeah.
And when she puts her foot down, they're having this argument in the house, and like they're about to be completely broke. They're already behind on their mortgage. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, I had this dream last night that you were at a baseball field with Terrence Mann. And he was like, Fenway Park? And she was like, is that the one with the big green wall? He goes, yeah. And she goes, like, y'all were like eating a hot dog together? And he's like, yeah. We were like sitting on the baseball or on the first baseline right in the middle. And she was like, yeah, I had that same dream. And then it was like, all right, let's do it. It's like, what in the world? Like, how did you get...
That is a huge leap.
Yes, it's like, first, like, how did he get to, like, ease his pain, and all of a sudden he's sitting in the student council, or this teacher council, whatever, parent council thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, let's mention Terrence Mann's book that's, like, this terrible thing for our kids to read. And he's like, oh, I need to ease his pain. And then he explains it to his wife, and then his wife's like, oh, we had the same dream. Drive 3,000 miles or whatever it is to go pick this guy up and go to Boston.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, like, this movie is not logical. No, that's what you have to...
It's a different world. There's not regular logic.
Rules.
Yeah.
The rules of marriage, the rules of relationships doesn't exist in this movie.
So he makes a little trip over to Boston in a old VW bus.
Beautiful bus.
Yeah. Asks around, and then he eventually finds Terrence, and of course Terrence doesn't want to go, and then he tries to kidnap him, which was a leap. They are cussing a lot in a PG movie.
Yeah.
I was like, damn, you can get away with stuff in the 80s. With a PG rating.
Yeah. A lot of... Yeah, so this was the first movie that I remember watching with my parents that they said the word ass.
Yeah.
And my family didn't just freak out. So like I said, like, we didn't watch Harry Potter because of the witchcraft or whatever. And we had to, like, turn off Bad News Bears because I accidentally repeated the S-H-I-T word. Because I thought he just said shoot in a weird accent. So I just kept repeating it, thinking that it was a weird accent. And my dad was just like, turn it off.
But to the Harry Potter thing, parents like that had no problem with Chronicles of Narnia.
No, that's a good point. We watched Chronicles of Narnia.
It's magic.
It's magic. It's witchcraft.
Aslan says, I knew the magics before blah, 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 whatever.
I know. But what was the focus on the Family Guy? James something?
Yeah.
Anyways, he advised parents not to watch Harry Potter.
Of course he did.
But he advised them to watch Chronicles of Narnia. Because it was C.S.
It's
Lewis.
different magic.
It's C.S. Lewis. Yeah.
It's different magic.
It has like a biblical tie to it.
Anyway. He eventually convinces... they have an argument. Of course, he thinks Kevin Costner's crazy. They go to Fenway Park. $7 for 2 hot dogs and 2 beers is amazing.
That's unbelievable.
I heard that and I was like, what?
That's unbelievable.
You pay $7 just for the hot dog nowadays.
You pay $7 for a half of a hot dog.
Probably. Yeah. It's probably more like 14.
Yeah. No, like that's great. That's great. That's one of those wonderful things that you do whenever you watch like an old movie, and then you're just like, I wish I lived back then.
And there's nobody at the concession stands. I know it's in the middle of a baseball game, but at any NFL game, any game you go to, there's people up all the time, especially at a baseball game. I would.
Yeah, it was empty. Yeah. And at Fenway.
Yeah. And there's just 2, and then you go out and it's like a full stadium, and there's just 2 seats left. right before game time? Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, he sees a message on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what it says.
Moonlight Graham.
That's right.
Archibald Moonlight Graham.
And
gave his statistics.
Yeah. He writes it down, and then he drops James Earle Jones off, and then goes to leave, and there he is standing in the street, and he says what was on the thing. He's like, "You saw it too." He's like, "Yeah, I saw it too. You saw it too. Let's go to." They figure out that he lived in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Minnesota. I can't.
Minnesota. Yeah.
So they head off to this little town in Minnesota.
And all of a sudden, time travel.
Honestly, this movie was really starting to lose me at this point. The best part of this movie is like the end when they get back to the farm. Eventually, get back to the farm. That is the heart and soul of this movie.
It is.
It was hard to hang on at this point.
Yes. Because, the Moonlight Graham thing, it just. Yeah. It's great because of the ending.
Because it's set.
Because you need the character in the ending.
All it does is set up that one incident, which we'll get to. Basically, they spend time in this town, figure out he became a doctor, and then Kevin Costner time travels.
Yeah, that's.
I mean,
I have in my notes all caps with a ton of exclamation points. Time travel.
Yeah. We've got dead baseball players coming out of a cornfield. Why not?
Yeah.
And it's Burt Lancaster.
Great actor.
Mm-hmm. Only in his movie for like 10 minutes, but anyway.
Sure.
Tells him, "I'm fine. I don't need to play baseball. You can go back home, I guess." I don't know what
Yeah. So yeah. So he has this whole conversation with him because he's still thinking ease his pain, right? Mm-hmm. So he's thinking, now I have to ease Archibald, whatever his name is, Moonlight Graham's pain, because he only got to play in one game. He went out into the outfield for half of an inning, and that was the end of the season, and he was getting sent back down to the minors, never got an at bat, and so he just retired because he didn't want to go back down to the minors. And he goes hey, if you could have one wish in your life come true, what would it be? And so he goes into this whole thing of I would love to have an at bat so I could wink at the pitcher and act like I know something that he doesn't, and then slide into third base and wrap my arms around the bag like a warm embrace of a hug or whatever. He's like, I wish I could do that. And this old decrepit man right before he's about to die.
Again, this movie loves baseball.
Yeah, loves it. It's all about baseball from start to finish. And so, and again, it's painting this nostalgic hey, as a kid, didn't you love playing catch or going out and playing wiffle ball, and there's something magical about it or whatever. And so anyway, so that's the whole thing. And he's like, well, I can ease your pain. I can grant you this wish. And then it's no, I'm fine. I'm good with what I got.
Right.
And he said, isn't that a tragedy that you were only this was beautiful. He said, isn't it a tragedy that you only got to live out your dream for 5 minutes? And he said, no, what would have been a tragedy if I had only been able to be a doctor for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was he put everything into perspective of the real world is, it needs doctors. It needs IT guys. It needs people to make the world go around and people to make things happen.
Yeah.
To save lives, to influence people. It doesn't necessarily need baseball players.
And there's I think it's in the motel after that, where he says, I think Kevin Costner says, I think he asked James Earle Jones, do you think one pitch can change the world? Mm-hmm. And James Earle Jones says, one did, because if he hadn't have missed that pitch, this town would have never had its doctor.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, I get what you're doing, movie.
Yeah, exactly. He said if Archie Graham would have had a hit in the major leagues, then he probably would have stayed in the major leagues and never became a doctor. It's That's good.
And so they take that as a cue that it's time to head back to Iowa.
Yeah.
But oh no, we come across this young kid on the side of the road that says a baseball team will give him a job. And they figure out that it's the younger version of the doctor. Why?
Because, Preston, this movie is illogical from start to finish.
Yeah, it sure is. I was like, because it took me a while to figure it out. I was like, in the 80s? I mean, I knew that was a thing. And then, like, I guess I was kind of figuring it out with Kevin Costner, too. Because that was a thing a long time ago, like, before professional sports was, like, really big. Teams would find jobs for players, like, even when the NFL first started.
Yeah.
They worked at, like, different jobs. Like, I think even in Johnny Unitas's time with the Colts.
They did.
He worked a second job.
Yeah, I think he was in insurance.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. Look at that. I could be completely off there. But yeah, no, and Ray Kinsella even says, like, they haven't done this for years, where, like, you would have them play at night, but they would have a day job or whatever, and that they used to do that in, like, the 30s, and he said, like, my dad used to do that or whatever.
Yeah.
So it, like, mixes the timelines of, like, 70s and 80s of, like, people picking up hitchhikers.
Yeah.
And so he picks up this hitchhiker because he's a hippie, and he's like, hey, yeah, let me help you out or whatever. And then this guy is hitchhiking because he's looking for a job in baseball. I play baseball. Yeah.
What's your name? Archie. Who?
Yeah. Archie Graham.
And then again, this wife, like, they pull up to the house, and he's like, oh, this is Terrence. She's like, hello. And then this is Archie, and she's just like, sure.
Yeah.
You know? Might as well.
Yeah. Like, where'd he come from? The 1930s. Okay. There's no questions asked.
But meanwhile, while all this has happened, in the background, we have the only conflict in this movie. His brother-in-law has like I guess it's an investment group that wants to buy the land.
Yes. Yeah.
And he keeps, because they're about to go, the bank is about to foreclose on them, and the investment group buys the title on the land, I think. Mm-hmm. But they haven't foreclosed on it yet.
Correct.
And he's trying to get him to sell.
Correct.
Sell. He's like, no, it's this baseball field. It's supposed to be here for a reason.
Yeah.
So, they confront him the next day when they're out watching baseball again. Snatches the little girl. Like,
yeah. That was, like, aggressive.
Yeah.
And, like, so again,
he's back.
No logical. Yeah, there's no logic to any of this.
Yeah.
So, like, this guy is the uncle, right? And so he's having this argument with his brother-in-law, saying, "Hey, you need to sell the land. You're being dumb. You're gonna put my sister in all this financial ruin. Blah blah blah." And so, like, they're disagreeing, and then all of a sudden he, like, picks up his niece and, like, shakes her.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are you doing? Like, who does that? Anyways, so he did that.
And then she falls off the back.
Yeah.
And she's passed out.
Yeah.
Nobody can get her to come back up. She's not breathing. He tells her to go call the ambulance. Then he looks up at Archie. And he's like, wait.
Yeah.
And again, she goes with it.
Annie, stop. Don't call the ambulance. Don't let them know that our daughter's dying.
This ghost who's 20 years old right now is about to become a 70-year-old man as a doctor.
He's about to step in the gravel. Step off the field. And let's talk about how illogical this is. So they pick up Archie Graham as a 20-year-old snot-nosed kid.
Yeah.
And they bring him all the way to Iowa. They then dress him and put him on this field. And now he's not allowed to come back off of the field without turning into a 70-year-old man. He wasn't a 70-year-old man 30 minutes ago before he stepped onto the field.
Why can't he just, like, when he crosses back, just become little Archie?
Yeah. So anyways, that's illogical. But what was also funny was, like, so after the uncle shakes the girl who just took a bite of a hot dog and now is like suffocating on this hot dog. He shakes this girl and then he like drops her, like she slips out of his hand or whatever, and drops her from the top bench of the bleachers onto the ground. By the time, like, it literally takes like 5-10 seconds for them to get down to the ground where this girl's now laying literally lifeless. Like, I mean, she goes from like being a little
She's even
kid
pale.
Pale, and she has like her lips have turned blue.
Yeah,
like if you dead. She's like she's dead in 5 to 10 seconds, and again, the father is just like, no, wait, Annie, stop.
This ghost is coming off the field to this ghost who was a pediatrician in a small town. He's 50, about to save our daughter.
Yeah, I know he looks like he's 20, but he's about to be 50 years older with a a medical degree.
Yeah.
And he's going to know exactly what to do. So, he steps off the field.
Yeah, and it turns out she was choking on the hot dog she was eating, which I guess I'll cut it a break. Like, she probably passed out from the fall. She hit her head. And choking at the same time. Sure. Why not? Sure. So he just whacks her on the back. Doesn't even do the Heimlich.
Nothing.
Just like a couple of smacks on the back. And out comes a hot dog.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever.
Again, this movie is not for the critics in us.
No.
It's meant for the believers in us.
Yes. And one of those believers eventually turns out to be Terrence Mann. Played by James Earle Jones.
Yeah. So this happens literally right before everything that we just explained. So right before the brother-in-law has this freak out episode.
There's nobody coming.
Yeah.
And then James Earle Jones goes off in the speech about how this is all going to work out.
It's so beautiful, too.
People will come, Ray. They'll come to Iowa for reasons they can't even fathom. They'll turn up your driveway, not knowing for sure why they're doing it. They'll arrive at your door as innocent as children, longing for the past. Of course, we won't mind if you look around, you'll say. It's only $20 per person. They'll pass over the money without even thinking about it. For it is money they have, and peace they like. And they'll walk out to the bleachers. Sit in shirt sleeves on a perfect afternoon. They'll find they have reserved seats somewhere along one of the baselines where they sat when they were children and cheered their heroes. And they'll watch the game. And it'll be as if they'd dipped themselves in magic waters. The memories will be so thick they'll have to brush them away from their faces. People will come, Ray. The one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball. America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It's been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. But baseball has marked the time. This field, this game, is a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us of all that once was good, and it could be again. Oh, people will come, Ray. People will most definitely come.
Like, that's just pouring honey in your ear.
It really is. Like, the voice,
He's the only one that could have delivered that speech.
So good.
And like $20 to watch a baseball game. Let's calm down.
Right after we were talking about how they paid $7 for a beer and a hot dog.
Yeah, they didn't pay no $20 to get in the Fenway.
And he goes, yes. They won't have any reason or rhyme to it. They'll just hand you $20.
Over $20. And they mentioned because they can afford it. And it's like, sounds like you're kidnapping people and having them drive, like, spiritually kidnap these people and mind control them into driving down this highway. But,
the quote is, they'll pass over the money without even thinking about it. For it is money they have and peace they lack. Like, That's a great line.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, that's I mean, that's everybody, right?
Yeah.
Everybody in America. That's what makes baseball beautiful, is because for 3 hours, although it's a very long
It's
game,
a very long
but
game.
for 3 hours you just get to be in the stands and just witness like just peace for a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, that's the beauty of sports. It's the beauty of baseball specifically, is like there's just so much tied into it. It's not just the game. It's the fact that you have peanuts and Cracker Jacks. It's the fact that you have beer and a hot dog. It's the fact that you have the wave and all this like random things that go into the game. And it's like, it's baseball and it's America, and it provides some sort of peace without having to think about the fact that I just paid $10 for a beer that I would usually get for $1.50. You know, it's like, it's okay.
It's also the one sport in America where you can have like 3 or 4 beers and still keep track of what's going on,
or even still play.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But after all this, everyone's convinced, and then the players start going back, and Shoeless Joe points at just in their direction, says, "You want to come?" And Kevin Costner's like, "Yeah, I want to come." "Oh no, not you, Terrence. Him. You want to come?"
Yeah.
And he's like, Kevin Costner's like, the first selfish moment. Well, this has kind of all been selfish.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
But he plays it off like this is the first selfish moment
of his entire life.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I built this thing. I want to know what's in there.
I've never once asked what's in it for me.
What's in it for me? Yes, you have, dude. You've thought about that the entire time. I heard voices in my head. I need to go here. I need to find this guy. I need to build this thing. Whatever, dude. But he says, basically, there's no real fancy thing. He just says you're not invited.
Yeah.
And so James Earle Jones just walks into it. Kevin Costner's like, oh, okay, whatever. And tells James, like, you don't know you're going to see James Earle Jones again.
You don't, actually.
Because he says, like, well, you better take notes and tell me what happened. Like, he's going to die.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, he's not going to come back.
No, I don't think any of those players are coming back.
Yeah.
But who draws his attention to his dad in the catcher's uniform?
So I don't think anybody does. I think so. He just is like a straggler.
Yeah.
At the end of it, so that whole thing happens with James Earle and Shoeless Joe, and I don't know, we're like mixing characters and their real names, but
yeah.
Anyways, Terrence Mann and Shoeless Joe go into the cornfield, and then Kevin Costner turns back around and sees this younger guy.
Yeah.
That is like used to be a catcher or whatever, and so he's like taking off his gear, and he's just comes up to him and thanks him for hosting the baseball games. Like, thank you so much for letting us come out and play and all this stuff. And so he has this like cordial conversation with this guy, like, hey, you're welcome. I'm glad I'm able to do it or whatever and all this stuff. And then this is, everybody knows, and even Kevin Costner knows that this is my dad, right? I'm talking to the younger version of my dad.
Yeah.
Because he recognizes him like very quickly or whatever. And so I think it was his wife that pointed it out, like, hey Ray, look at whatever. And so then they had that conversation, and then at the end of the conversation he's like, yeah, thanks or whatever, and he starts walking back to the cornfields, and all of a sudden Ray Kinsella goes, hey, Dad. And then, like,
the guy doesn't question
it. I mean, the guy's 20 years younger than him.
Yeah.
Right?
This is like he never knew the kid at this point in his life. Because he had the kid late. It's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
Because so the backstory, the whole point of the movie is that his dad, related to his son, which is Kevin Costner, Ray, in the form of baseball. He wanted him to be a baseball player. He wanted him to do all this because
he never could make it.
He used to be a baseball player, but he never actually made it all the way. So here he is now on the baseball field that Kevin Costner, Ray Kinsella built so that he would come. It wasn't, the whole point of the movie is that it wasn't Shoeless Joe Jackson that was going to come. It was his dad that was going to come, and they were going to be reunited, and he was going to be able to mend the relationship that he never actually got to mend because he said that terrible thing to his dad.
Yeah.
And then his dad died a couple of years later, and he was never able to build or rebuild that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So here's his opportunity. And so he calls out and he says, "Hey, Dad." And although, again, super illogical, none of it makes sense.
Sure.
It's not supposed to. But the beauty is that his dad, 10 years before he's actually his dad, he responds to his son's voice. He turns around and doesn't ask a question.
And then
He just says, "Hey, would you like to have a catch?"
Yeah.
And he goes, "Sure."
Sure.
And they have a catch. And it's like,
And that's when I texted
Tears.
you the 3 emoji crying faces, because that's what I was literally doing.
I know.
I was like, ugh.
because that's the point of the movie. Is like,
Mhm.
like, so for me and my dad, it was baseball, like, right? So my
Mhm.
dad would come home, like after working from, so whenever I was a kid, he owned his own trucking company, and so he would work literally from like 6 a.m. till 6 p.m.
Yeah.
And he'd come home during the summer, and the first thing that he would do would come home, he'd greet his wife, greet us, and then we'd have dinner real quick, and it would be as quick as possible so that me and my dad could go outside and play catch.
Wow.
And so it was like, and he was just always like, anytime I asked him, it was like, "Hey, Dad, can we go play catch?" It was never "I'm too tired," or "No, I don't want to do that," or "Hey, I got to do this," or "Got to do that." It was, "All right, let's go." And so, like, that's the whole point of the movie. And that line is like, regardless of how, I guess, how much turmoil has come into the relationship of a parent and a kid, at the end of the day, like, there's going to be that, whether it's baseball, whether it's video games, whether it's just doing whatever in the backyard, like, your parents want to be with you as a kid. And so all they need is that kid to say, "Hey, will you come do this with me?" I mean, it happens all the time with Harper, my 3-year-old daughter. Is like, I'll be sitting there, answering emails or whatever on my computer on the couch, and then a song will come on, and Harper will just be like, "Hey, Dad, will you dance?" It's like, I'm a terrible dancer. I'm the worst that there ever is. But 100 times out of 100, I'm going to get up off of my seat. I'm going to dance with my little girl.
Yeah.
Because she's my little girl.
Yeah.
That's the picture that this movie paints at the end of it that makes it just amazing.
Yeah. And as we widen out the shot, we see they did show up.
Yes.
They did come.
Yes.
There's cars lined all the way into town, I guess.
Like, all the way. I don't even. This shows my knowledge of Iowa.
Yeah.
What states surround? Where is Iowa?
I don't know.
So, the amount of cars that are out there, it looks like it's like rush hour in
Yeah.
Atlanta, Georgia,
Yeah.
or New York City.
I was watching an interview with Kevin Costner. I watched a bunch of interviews about this movie. He said that was a real shot.
Really?
That, like, because they shot it in Iowa,
Wow.
and all they did was just put a call out on the radio and said, "We're shooting this movie at this spot.
Wow.
All we need you to do is drive to it." And, like, so all the headlights and everything, that's all real people.
That's insane.
And if you've seen the movie, it's a lot.
I mean, it had to have, like, span across, I don't know, 5 miles.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it backs up, and it's just like, as it continues to back up, there's just zigzags of cars, like, all the way. I mean, that's insane.
Today
the power of the radio back in the 80s.
Because today it would be on a drone shot and Twitter.
Yes. Yeah.
But that is
funny.
Field of Dreams.
What a movie.
What a movie. What do you rate it after your 10th time, I guess, of seeing it?
What's the scale?
1 to 10.
1 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I know I've been very bullish of how much I love this movie.
Yeah.
But I'm also I like to think of myself as a movie critic.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be harsh on it.
Okay.
I'm going to say it's a solid 6.8.
Ooh.
And the reason for that is because of how illogical it all is and whatever. Yeah. But it's such a great movie when it comes to nostalgia and helping you feel like you did 20 years ago. You know, when you first watched it. It's great.
I'm going to cheat and do 2 scores.
Okay. Yeah.
Because this is my podcast. I do what I want.
That's right.
As a movie, just, as how it's shot, story, I give it a 5.
Oh, okay.
With, the lot, yes, this is illogical baseball players, but the story format.
Okay, 5.
Not so great. Themes. The themes of this movie and how it uses that, relatability of parents and children. And I give it a 7.
Okay. Let's meet in the middle.
Okay.
Let's call it a 6.
Just give the movie a hard 6.
A hard 6.
Okay.
I think it's fair. I think one thing I wanted to note was
because there's no conflict. There's no antagonist. There's no...
No. It's just this one man going through his own personal journey, and nobody's stepping in his way.
And the inciting incident is almost immediate.
Yeah, exactly. So it just kind of unravels from there.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's just a regular lazy movie that you can just watch and just enjoy. I will say, in the 80s and 90s, I feel like soundtracks were really important.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have a bunch of really awesome songs like you would expect in a Karate Kid movie or something like that.
Yeah.
But it did have just perfectly, perfect sounds in the background the entire
a lot
time.
Of orchestral music that would swell and make you feel good.
Exactly, and it just made sense the entire movie. And it went through. So I enjoyed that about the movie. And that was the first time that I enjoyed that. This past time I watched it, because that was the first time I noticed it.
And Kevin Costner as an actor is always hit and miss for me.
So do you think this was a hit or a miss?
I think it was a hit. It's a hit.
Okay, I would agree.
Because after this, he did
a lot of misses.
Robin Hood, Waterworld, just some not good stuff.
Yeah.
And then does Dances with Wolves.
Yeah, but this was such a hit.
This was early Costner.
Yes, this was a hit. This was what made him Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
And then Bull Durham was also a Kevin Costner hit. I actually have never watched Bull Durham. It's another baseball movie.
I've never seen it.
I hear it's good.
Only baseball movie I really enjoyed as a kid was Angels in the Outfield.
So I looked at the movies that you would like on the IMDb or whatever.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is probably going too long on the podcast.
No, it's fine.
And I saw The Rookie with Dennis Quaid.
I've seen that. That's corny.
Okay, that's a wonderful movie. We might have to do a podcast on that. The Sandlot.
Oh, see.
Okay.
Look.
Don't even. Oh man.
Okay.
That's a solid 7.
I saw that. See, the problem is, everybody I went to college with saw it when they were kids.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I saw it when I was cynical and 22.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Hated it. Anyway.
Okay, what about Angel? You said Angels in the Outfield.
Angels in the Outfield. Loved it.
Yes. When did you watch it first?
When I was a kid.
Okay, exactly.
Don't want to watch it again, probably.
You probably wouldn't.
No.
So that's also a suggested movie.
Uh-huh.
And then Rookie of the Year. So 3 of those 4 are my favorite baseball movies of all time.
Okay.
And that says a lot because I literally grew up on baseball movies.
Yeah.
So Rookie of the Year used to be my favorite movie of all time. That's where another illogical thing, a kid breaks his arm and then all of a sudden can throw a 100-mile-per-hour fastball.
And,
and then gets signed to a major league contract at the age of 12.
You're not the first person to have that reaction when I say that about Sandlot. So
Yeah.
I've learned to live with it.
Anyways.
Anyway, that is the end of this episode. Aaron, thank you for
Preston.
sitting here and talking about movies.
Dude, thanks for having me.
That's the end of this episode. If you want to send a suggestion, you can send it to secondtakemoviespod@gmail.com or our Instagram and Twitter at Second Take Movies at both of those. And I will see you next time on Second Take Movies.